Lael slowly started to wake up. He opened his eyes but closed them immediately and covered them with his arm as the light was blinding him. The back of his head was aching.
Shit. It hurts like hell.
Starting to slowly open his eyes again in order to adjust them to light, he suddenly held his breath. It was too quiet around him.
Wait. Something or someone hit me. What happened?
Lael's breath was irregular, and he tried to calm himself so he wouldn't start to panic. Aiken started to look around. He seemed to be laying down on an old bed in an empty room with a window behind him, which was causing the light to hit his eyes.
Finally,
a voice said next to him. Aiken jumped a bit and looked to where that voice was. A teenager with a weird outfit was standing in a dark corner of the room, looking at him with a bored face.
Where am I? What happened to—
I don't have the answers you need. Now come outside at once. You might learn something out there.
Lael frowned and did as he said, although he was confused about what was going on. As he opened the door, Lael's eyes were blinded by the light again. He blinked sometimes to adjust his eyes to the light again and slowly opened his mouth. In front of him was what it looked like a market in a developing country. There were many trees around and sand on the floor. The people walking and wandering around were pretty unique as well. He began to notice what was right in front of him. A cage, not empty. Damon, Martha, and some soldiers were inside. They were tied up and gagged. Their eyes were pleading. Lael gasped and turned to the teen that was with him. He was beginning to talk when he noticed the boy had his hand on his gun, pointed at his chest. Lael didn't think twice. He grabbed the teen's wrist and twisted it away from where he was standing, making the teen arch with pain and drop the gun. In quick moves, he twisted his arm and kicked his frontal leg, which made him slip and fall to the ground. While grabbing his fist, Aiken buried a knee on his back and twisted even more his arm, making him scream with pain. For Lael's surprise, no one came to rescue him. Lael smirked.
You need to turn off the security first. If you want to shoot someone.
And you should beat someone your size, pig.
A deep male voice behind Aiken threatened him and kicked him in the ribs, making him fall before even glance at him. Lael screamed with pain and tried to take a good look to the bastard. He could hear Damon and Martha muffled screams. The man was quite tall, tanned, and looked like he weighed 260 pounds. He had a blank expression that was terrifying. He looked like an indigenous man, with long black hair and some weird adornments. Lael couldn't figure out how old he could be, but he was definitely older than 30. He had what seemed 4 parallel lines carved in his chest, which picked up Lael's attention. Those and also what it seemed 5 hand bones rearranged in a large necklace. If it was real or fake, Lael would never know. Aiken's ribs were stinging, but he tried to drag himself away from the man anyway. Although the man easily pulled Lael by the hair and dragged him to the middle of the road, the scary man cleared his throat and shouted to everyone that was passing by. He pulled his hair more so Lael's face could be seen.
We have here broken merch. It's tradable. It's half the price for being broken, but it's a recent acquisition. We also have more there. Come to see the other new merchandise.
What? Merch? Me? And what does he mean by broken?
Lael's eyes expressed confusion and fear. He looked to the people that were walking on the street. Some didn't even pay attention. Others looked to him with curiosity. A few approached and looked at him.
Is it strong? It seems to have some muscle at least.
A man with a strong presence asked. He looked to be around 50 years old and had a buffed body structure. Next to him was a girl that seemed to be in her 20s. Both were dark-skinned and had dark eyes and dark hair.
Yes, you can take a look at it if you want.
The creepy man said with a grin on his face while holding Lael's arms to the back so he couldn't punch them and made him stand up. He whispered next to his ear.
I wouldn't recommend you to use your legs to hurt this man. You'll end up without legs. Believe me, it wouldn't be the first time.
Lael gulped. He wasn't sure what was happening anymore. The man in his 50s stood right next to him and started to look him up, observing behind his cloth. Lael felt invaded and really wanted to fight back, but he knew it wasn't a good idea at all. After all, being referred to as an it in merch would probably reveal that he wasn't living by his continent rules anymore. After seeing what he wanted, the man looked to the taller guy.
How much for this one?
200 coins.
For a broken thing? That seems a bit much, if you ask me.
Fine. 150 coins.
What do you think, Vera? Do you like it? Is this the one you want?
The man asked the girl, who seemed to be his daughter. She smiled and nodded, looking to Lael.
He seems perfect.
She looked younger than Lael. He was bashful. How could they act like that?
It looks good indeed.
The man corrected. He removed a small bag of money and started to count the coins. When he was done, he looked to the guy that was holding Aiken and threw the bag on the floor.
Here's the payment. Check it as I hold it.
The salesman passed Lael to the man's hands in a way Lael couldn't escape during the transaction. He needed to have a plan. He felt the girl's eyes on him, and when Lael looked at her, her eyes were glowing with fascination, exactly like when you buy a toy for a kid.
It's correct. Thank you, and come back someday again.
He tied Lael's hands behind his back to make it easier to control him. Lael looked towards Damon and Martha one last time before being shoved to the front in the direction of the road. The fear of the unknown made Aiken lose the will to speak. He didn't scream, nor did he speak. He watched carefully around him while they walked. There were some salesmen and saleswomen that were selling food, water, supplies, and also people. The people that were for sale were always in a cage. Some were women, some were children, some were dressed, some not. Usually men were tied up by his neck with a chain that resembled dogs. Lael wondered why, and after walking a bit more, he figured it out by watching two males fighting between each other. There were people around, clapping and screaming for their favorite. It was a street fight, and suddenly one of them gained advantage and pinned the other one on the ground. He grabbed the other man's head and smashed several times on the floor until his head looked like a smashed watermelon. The crowd cheered and they began to auction between them to decide which one would take the winner home. Lael looked away. His gag reflex was making him want to throw up, but he knew that he shouldn't do that. He was good at hiding emotions. Outside he looked empty, but inside he was terrified, shocked, and confused. They walked for another couple meters. Lael saw some kids playing right next to a corpse. Farther behind them, some people were having an orgy.
What has happened for the world to come to this? How aren't there any rules? How can people think this behavior is normal? How can this be allowed? And worse, the government is actually covering this.
Lael started to tremble. He could also see other people walking around like him. Although their eyes were empty and they had many bruises, they were walking puppets.
Vera, stay away. We still need to train it.
The man warned as he noticed his daughter getting closer to Lael.
But want to see him closely. I want to...
I know, but right now, it can't be.
The man explained.
What's the name you're gonna give it?
The girl put a finger on her lips, thinking. Lael gulped.
I'm Lael.
Vera's father quickly passed his muscled arm around Aiken's neck and squeezed it enough to make Lael struggle to breathe. Lael tried, unsuccessfully, to remove his arm with his hands. He understood he was too weak for it.
Stop it, you're gonna hurt him.
She whimpered, trying to remove her father's arm around Lael's neck.
I know you're from another place, and that you don't know how things go around here, but let me explain this to you, and I hope it's the first and last time I'll have to talk to you like this. You hear me?
Lael nodded, scared.
Good. everything here is purchasable. I own you since I bought you, so you'll only do what I tell you to do, alright? If I tell you to speak, you speak. If I tell you to fight, you'll fight. If I tell you to kill yourself, you'll do it. Am I being clear?
As soon as the man finished talking, he loosened his arm, and Lael almost lost his balance, relieved to be able to breathe again. Vera held him by the arm.
Are you okay?
Lael was unsure if he'd reply or not. She looked to her father.
He is for me, so could you stop doing stuff like that and threaten him?
Lael looked away. The girl was really close to him, with the same shiny eyes. Aiken was trying to get away from her clinginess. When he noticed an odd change in the ambient, he couldn't tell what it was. He looked around. Nothing. Lael had the urge to run.
Am I having a panic attack?
He thought, feeling his heart pounding faster. Then he noticed a strange figure in the corner of his eyes. He looked at them. The figure was covered with a grayish cloak. Lael couldn't figure out if it was a man or a woman, as they had a mask covering their face. Nobody noticed the presence of that stranger, or if they did, they didn't care. Well, nobody except Lael and apparently Vera's father, who glared at them and began to put his hand inside his vest. A step forward, and another. In a blink of an eye, the man fell on the ground. He had been headshot. The figure continued to walk towards Lael in a faster pace. Vera screamed and ran towards her father. Vera was now lying down on the floor, dead. Another shot right in her forehead. People walking around that area started to look around and get away from them. Lael looked at the figure and was going to start to run when the figure held his wrist.
I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to save you. Please, come with me if you want to live. I promise I'll save your friends too.
The figure said, with a distorted voice, making it hard to figure out who it was. Lael looked at the figure's hand. They had gloves, but by the size, it was probably a woman's. He glared at the mask.
How can you guarantee that you're not lying to me, and that you're not going to shoot me down?
Aiken asked, trying to sound assertive when he actually felt scared and wanted to run away. The figure tilted their head.
I guess you'll have to take the risk. You're gonna die, and so will your friends out there anyway. I'm giving you a chance. Do you want it?
Lael Aiken gulped. He gritted his teeth.
Fine.
He wasn't sure if he was masking the right decision. But they were right. He had to take the risk. Of course he could have been lured out. But he was willing to take the chance.
Ever since I found myself here, I've been convinced that there's no way out. It's like being stuck in a spider's web.
Lael thought while following the figure with a wary face. He shook his head mentally.
No. Sometimes, even when we fall in a web of disaster and problems, we can manage to break free before they consume us. Whether or not they help, I will survive this new challenge. I will break free. I will survive.
We have here a broken merch. It's tradable. It's half the price for being the broke. Oh. Nope. We have here a broken mech. It's really good. You know, its arm is a bit jiggly, but you know, you can still punch with it. fuck. We have here a broken merch. We have here a broken merch. Sorry. Okay, right there. We have here a broken merch. Fucking hell. Take 106.